And here we go. Welcome everybody to another episode of The Big Idea. I'm your host, Dr. Jeffrey Hanna, here with Clear Chiropractic in Spokane, where we talk about the big idea. What is the big idea? It's how a little bone where your head meets the upper part of your spine can have a very big impact in terms of your health, your well-being, and can possibly change the quality and the trajectory of your life. And what I'm going to be talking about in this particular video is a build on of a conversation that I had started in a previous video where we had shown you some of the findings, some of the research as it related to how it is that the alignment, the motion, the stability of your upper neck actually affects the higher centers of your brain, your mood, your memory, your ability to concentrate, your ability to feel like yourself. But what I also want to do in this video is build on that just a little bit, because this is a very, very common conversation that I have in practice. And in all honesty, this is the interface about where upper cervical chiropractic fits into other forms of chiropractic that have to do with physical well-being, mental well-being, psychology, and other forms where, if you would, memory and emotions can get stored and trapped in your body. And so what I need to do here is make a little bit of a distinction about what it is that we're doing when we're looking at how the upper neck affects your mood, your emotions, your memory, but also then where it's essential that you are doing additional work that's going to help and allow those memories, those emotions, those stories to be processed out of your body so that you are able to actually be that healthy individual that you were born to be. So let's jump into it. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is just walk you through a little bit of the story about what happens in the first place. You see, we go through life experiencing any number of different micro traumas we often think of. There's not necessarily broken bones, there's not necessarily bleeding, but if the damage happens on the inside, it has the tendency to affect the weak part of our body, and that is at that pivotal junction where your head meets your spine. And so what I have here is a giant, very giant, model of your C1 vertebra and the C2. This is what's responsible for allowing you to do up and down movements with your head, and also pivoting movements like this. Now, what the issue is if you have an injury when you're learning to walk, learning to ride a bike, learning to play sports, car accidents, work-related injuries, what can happen is it can damage the ligaments that normally support this area. And in and of itself, that's not necessarily the problem, because you see we have bruises and bumps and scrapes all of the time. But what can happen on occasion is if those ligaments are damaged in a way where suddenly these vertebrae, which are normally designed to be moving, are no longer moving the right way. They become locked out of their normal alignment, their normal position. What that can do is that can start to accumulate physical stress that adds up over a period of months, years, and oftentimes decades. So in this way, many of the subtle little injuries that we experience when we're younger may not show up on an average for 15 years after that injury has occurred. And we never think, oh, maybe it was related to that time when we had a really nasty fall off the jungle gym. Or maybe that time we had that nasty knock in the neck when we were playing sports when we were in high school. Or maybe it was that little fender bender that we had, but we thought that we were okay at the time. And it shows up in any number of different ways later on in life. Headaches, migraines, vertigo, dizziness, chronic fatigue. The list is endless, and it's because the neurology that's normally protected by these two vertebrae is your medulla, your brainstem. It's where all of the vital life processing centers of your brain are located. And it's also the junction and the interface for all of the communication between your brain and the rest of your body. So if there's a choke point restriction going on here, again, even if it's a very small amount, it can add up like unpaid compound interest over that period of time to create very, very big problems later. Again, the small thing can create big issues down the track. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over to this particular little graphic here, which illustrates what the nature of the problem is. So your top vertebra in your neck is effectively, it's a ring like this. And what I'm showing you is a cross section of your spinal cord right through here and the brainstem. So it would actually be located in this little spot right down through here. So the problem, as I've just described it here, is if that vertebra, again, it's normally designed to be moving like this. But what can happen is essentially if it's locked out of position, even by a millimeter or two for that long period of time, the ligaments that are located on the inside, so right through here, they can start to exert a direct mechanical tension onto the cord itself. And if you would, it'd be like poking you in the arm like this. Now, if I was poking you in the arm, besides slap me, what you'd probably do first is you'd probably lean away. But what that does is that starts to produce tension that can start to affect these different centers of your body. And I'm not going to torture you with too much of the neurology here, but what I've drawn on the outside here and what the outside of your spinal cord is what's known as your spinocerebellar tract. The spinocerebellar tract is what conveys the information from your body up to your brain about muscle tension. So if there's a problem with muscle tension, your brain is going to receive that information. It's going to say, oh, there's a bit of a problem here. And what it's going to do is it's going to start to tip your body in different ways, producing tight muscles that manifests and starts to show up in posture abnormalities. And this is the first way that your body tries to compensate for these kinds of things. A lot of times people say to me, Jeff, I'm experiencing XYZ, and they come to the practice because they're looking for help for that. What were some of the early warning signs that I missed? It's your posture, is what I'm saying. When I say to people I'm a chiropractor, they're having a conversation like this, and I start talking about posture, and they say, okay, I need to sit up straight. Well, as you can see, there's still a little bit of an imbalance there. So it's not simply a matter of laziness and just needing to stand up straight. Yes, it's critical that you are working on your posture, but if these vertebrae, as I've described, are still locked in that abnormal position, you can do all of the rehab, all of the exercise, but it will only get you so far because this tension will persist. Now, I've yet to meet anybody who's managed to go through life with only one physical injury. And your body is designed to win. It's strong. It's resilient. And that's oftentimes why it is that many people can experience these kinds of injuries but not have any problems show up for a long period of time. It's usually when there's a second layer of injury and when the body is simply saying, we can't compensate for this anymore. That's when we start to experience problems. And this essentially is what the nature of the problem is. So I've already illustrated with the one vertebra here, but remember, we said that there are two that play in the role here. And we talk often about how the space between the C1 and the C2 vertebra, it's the grand compensator. That is whether you have a problem in your neck, your low back, or your little toe, what your brain will do in order to try to dissipate that stress is it's actually going to produce a little bit of a counter rotation like this between the C1 and the C2 vertebra, which is the effect as if you had your head slightly turned to one side. And I repeat, your head is designed to move that way, but if it is locked in that abnormal position for months, years, decades, then that stress is going to start to accumulate. And what it does is it can produce more of a torsion effect through those ligaments. And so it's no longer just a matter of where it's affecting those posture or those proprioceptors. It's actually starting to infiltrate into those other processing centers of your brainstem, of your neurology. And this is where it starts to show up in lots of other ways. If it is affecting these pathways located right through here, these are what are known as the spinal thalamic tracts. These are responsible for temperature regulation, pressure, and also pain. And these will connect with different parts of your body, letting you know that there is a problem, and it can show up in any part of your body. Why is that? Well, it's because all of the information that's coming from, say, your low back or even your little toe, it has to transmit right through this area. So you can actually have pain problems in other parts of your body, but where the problem is actually located is not necessarily where you are feeling the symptoms. And this is super important to understand the difference between cause and effect. Just because you have a problem in a certain part of your body does not mean that that's the area where you need to be treating the symptoms. You have to get to where the epicenter is located in order to actually make that true kind of long-term change. So what I've just described here, this is the process about how it is that this mechanical, this physical problem, an injury, a tiny misalignment in the upper part of your neck can start to affect the function of your brain-body communication. And the reason that that's going to have an impact is because what that does is it starts to stretch the neural tissue. And as it starts to overload your neural circuitry, because your brain is effectively a supercomputer capable of processing to the tune of about 40 quadrillion bits of information every second. But even as powerful as that supercomputer is, imagine your own computer. You turn on all of the programs all at once. Well, guess what? It's not going to be operating the way that it should be. So what we're talking about when you have these mechanical issues producing the tension up through here, if this is your normal neural processing capacity, your ability to process stress, whether it's physical, chemical, mental, or emotional, that becomes diminished. And what the research is showing us is that when you're able to make a specific correction, which allows for those vertebrae to unlock, which means that they're able to move, which means that your body is able to heal the right way, not only is that having the local impact here, but guess what? It means that because your brain is no longer subject to that degree of tension, what happens is it's actually able to heal and repair, and that processing power is able to go back to where it used to be. In the same way that if your computer is running a little bit sluggish, turn off a few programs first, and what you find is it's able to process much more the way that it was actually designed. And so this is what we find, is that when we can make this correction for the upper part of a person's neck, it frees up the processing capacity so that your brain, your body are able to heal and function the way that they were designed. But in the same breath, that does not mean that that is the full part of the story. And that's because what we're talking about here is a change in the quantity of the communication going on between your brain and your body. What happens is if you also have a problem with the quality of that information, so that is the mental, emotional traumas that we accumulate over the course of childhood, adulthood, all of that sort of stuff. This is more akin to having malware on your computer. Doesn't matter how many programs you turn on, you turn off. The default setting in your brain is still not functioning exactly as well as it should be. And what this means is it means that when we make that correction to the upper part of your neck and restore your brain's normal processing capacity, well, guess what? You still have to work on actually breaking down all of those old conscious and unconscious stories, the accumulation of all that stuff that also impacts your physiology. And this is both one of the reasons why it oftentimes is, and this is often the situation for my own self, is when my own neck goes out of alignment. I was born with forceps, so I had an injury right from day dot when I was born. And it showed up many, many years later, and a few other issues when I was a kid, but we still go. We're all only human. But one of the things that I do notice is that when my neck goes out of alignment, I can't process my emotions properly. And you could say, okay, maybe that's me being a guy. But there are also times where it's like, no, I want to be able to feel something, but it's like something is just stuck inside and I can't process the emotion, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it is disappointment, whether it's happiness. Things are just relatively flat. And then when I have that correct, adjustment done, because I can't adjust myself, and thank goodness I've got a really good team of docs who are able to take care of me as well. So I speak of this not only as the chiropractor, but also as the individual. that when that is open, when that's free, and it's like, oh, I can feel the pressure actually being relieved, what it means that, okay, the capacity has been opened up. But now what I need to do is I need to process all of those stories that have been accumulated in my neurology and in my body at the exact same time. And what that means is it means that the job is not done. I need to go internally. I need to look at the stuff that I may not necessarily want to look at. I need to look at my thoughts. I need to look at my behaviors. I need to look at my habits. I need to look at my very belief structures. Because even though, and I'll come back here a little bit when we talk about that brain-body communication, imagine that, you're talking about water that would normally be flowing and it's hitting this constriction point here. Well, guess what? What if the water was actually polluted? You're dealing with dirty water, dirty, bad, unconscious thoughts that are affecting the default setting of your brain. It means that even if you release that tension by adjusting the upper part of the neck, guess what? It still is dirty water that's actually flowing through the system. And you need to work on being able to clean up that dirty water as well. And that means changing the way that you perceive, the way that you look at different kinds of things in your own life, what it means. And it means being able to process your emotions. It means being able to give yourself permission to feel the different things that you need to feel in your life. And I repeat, this is suddenly where it is outside of my normal scope of practice. But this is also where it is where physical touch, where even like the lightest little bits of force along the lines of a craniosacral therapy, along the lines of tonal techniques, along the lines of spinal flow, these different kinds of treatments that exist out there, what they do is they help the brain to be able to properly process that kind of information so that not only is the system clear, but you can also start to be able to work through that stuff, which metaphorically has a way of cleaning up the water. So in this way, there's not just a single magic adjustment or anything like that that is necessarily going to make you healthy. I say this oftentimes, and it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because people are like, what are you talking about? I make the statement that chiropractic does not make a person healthy. And the reason for that is because health is multifactorial. It requires that you're physically fit. It requires that you take good care of your nutrition. It requires that you take adequate amount of time to rest, to decompress. Of course, it requires that your body is working the way that it should be. But what it also requires is that you are actively working consciously as a human being to be able to process your thoughts, your emotions, and everything else that goes with that affects not just your own internal physiology, but also the quality of your life. And there are an infinite number of books written on this subject. What are the different ways that we can process these different kinds of feelings? And it's our feelings, our emotions. They are the true litmus for how it is that we are feeling. If we find ourselves falling down into a negative spiral, yes, it's always critical to make sure, okay, is our body playing a trick on our brain? Because if you've got that choke point going on in the upper part of your neck, remember, it's the equivalent of like poking you in the arm or having a pebble in your shoe. I don't care how much of a positive person you think that you are and how much you try to meditate and focus on all the good quality things in life. You still got a pebble in your shoe. You still got something that's poking you, annoying you. That's going to drive any person insane. But if that's free, what it does is it frees up that neural processing capacity in your brain so that you can actually face the things with the resources that you have built into your neurology. And there is a principle in chiropractic that is to the effect that the forces, the healing forces within your body, never intentionally do something to harm or injure you. And so what that oftentimes means is that if you have emotions come to the surface, particularly if there is old mental, old emotional trauma of different kinds and varieties, the only reason that can come to the surface, presuming your neck is properly cleared, is it's because those healing forces know that it's actually safe to process these previous emotions that before we didn't actually have the resources to deal with. And I repeat, what this requires looking inside of us. And I also would strongly recommend that this is not something that you should be doing on your own, especially if you are dealing with strong histories of physical, emotional, mental abuse. This is something that really should be done in conjunction where you are working with a qualified health professional. This might be a psychologist. This might even be a psychiatrist in certain circumstances. This might be working with somebody who does what's called eye movement desensitization activities. So it involves moving the eyes. This may involve working with somebody who, again, does craniosacral or primitive retained reflexes, somebody along the lines of an occupational therapist. There are so many different modalities in this space that help us to be able to process our emotions. But oftentimes we need help with that because you see, many of the things that can cause us to be quote unquote stuck in life, it's because we don't know what the solution is. We knew what the solution was. If we were able to work through that solution on our own without a little bit of guidance, well, guess what? We probably would have been able to move right through it. So if we're dealing with worry, blame, jealousy, all these negative kinds of emotions like that, if we were able to resolve the issue on our own, we would have been able to do it. So oftentimes, by working with the right kind of professional, they're able to help connect the dots for us in different ways where we might be able to look internally and say to ourselves, I never thought about it that way before. And as a consequence of that, it's able to shift and it's able to change our perception. When we change our perception, then we have an ability to look at circumstances in a different way. And when we are able to look at circumstances in the past, no matter how horrific they may have been, when we change that perception, it gives us the opportunity to be able to move up in that scale. And how do we know if we're going in the right direction? We can use our emotions as the litmus test. We can see that, okay, yes, I am always focusing on anger and blame. All right, when I'm thinking about these different kinds of thought processes, can I focus on how it is that that actually may have served me? That yes, there were bad things that had happened to me in my life, but I refuse to be a victim to that circumstance. I instead choose to focus on what that has given me. And sometimes it may be nothing more than it's taught me that I am actually a very strong individual, that as hard as this is, this burden that I bear, that I'm able to still go forward. I'm able to help other people. I'm able to inspire other people. It's caused me to make certain choices in my life that have allowed me to make a positive, a constructive difference. Now, this isn't easy, and I do repeat that this is well beyond my pay grade and well outside, my normal scope of practice. But the truth is that this is sometimes when I can see that a person is struggling with different things in their body, with, stress, with not being able to process different kinds of emotions. Oftentimes, by just being able to give them the guidance here to let them know what's actually going on in their body, and repeating that your body is designed to win. We're born 100% perfect, but what happens is we accumulate all of this stuff over the years that takes away or attempts to cover up that brilliance that we were all born with, the lives that we were meant to lead. And so by rekindling that, by recognizing that it's like, okay, no, there's nothing wrong with you. There's just all of this stuff that's been accumulated over that period of time. And if you can help a person to release those layers, that gives them that opportunity to go back to become that person who they were really meant to. And yes, we have all kinds of different voices and thoughts and ideas chatting around in our head all of the time. How do we know which ones that we need to listen to? As a general rule, one of the best things that I've learned is this bit of advice. The voices you need to listen to are those which speak quietly, calmly, and without judgment. I repeat, without judgment, because a lot of times the stories that we carry around in ourselves, it's like, oh, if we do this, it means that we're a bad person. or if we do this, we should feel guilty, or we should feel shame. That word should. That's implying then that whatever that voice is, that story that you're running inside of your brain there, that's something that you learned. That's something that somebody, whether you remember it or not, told you about who you should be. And that represents one of those layers that is actually interfering with your brilliance, with the joy, with your default natural human setting, which are all of these things right over here. In life, we were born to live from when we're born, we were meant to be living extraordinary lives. We're not meant to be dealing with all this stuff, but so much of that's where we spend our time. And I repeat, it's because of the accumulation of all of that stuff that we accumulate. We need to be able to peel that back one layer at a time. And I'd love to tell you that it's an easy process. I'd love to tell you that I have all of my own stuff figured out. I have yet to meet anybody who has all of their own stuff figured out. The difference is as we're working through our own thoughts, our own emotions to really be the best versions of ourselves, are we operating and dealing with those struggles at this level of our potential, or are we dealing with it somewhere more up here? And yes, I know that it is simple for me to be able to say that and make that distinction, but I also emphasize not always easy. And that's because people have really gone through, so many people have gone through really, really horrific circumstances in their life. And so it takes absolutely nothing away from that some people's challenges really are, they're greater. But I've also learned, very important, that you're never comparing yourself to who you think that you necessarily should be. The best measure of any person's progress is simply to be able to look forward, to use that prefrontal cortex, to use that visionary, to use that creative part of your brain. How is it that you can make your future better and not be dictated by the circumstances of the past? So it requires, as we said, not just having the free flow of the quantity. Again, we need to fix the quantity, addressing the upper neck so that your brain is able to process all of this stuff. But then we also need to look at the quality of the information, the stories that we are telling ourselves. And again, looking for signs of should and judgment. Those are the telltale signs that when those thoughts come into you, think, that's interesting. Why is that? And in that way, you become the perceiver of your own thoughts. That then allows you to be able to start making changes, to start thinking about things and using your brain in a different way. And when you start using your brain in a different way, that's what gives you a much better, a much stronger chance of being able to change the course and trajectory of your life, rather than being in a downward spiral like this, where it's still going to be challenged and you'll still have ups and downs, but where you do have the ability to start going up, being that person that you always meant born to be. So I hope that you have enjoyed this particular little video here. If you have, please do write down a few comments. Please do like and subscribe to the channel here. And if you've got friends or family that you think would actually benefit from watching this video, to make a bit of a distinction again, especially if you're struggling with different, not just physical things in your body, but also that sense of mental, emotional, you're not exactly sure what's going on here, please do share this with them, because hopefully a little bit of the thoughts that I've been able to give in terms of the clarity will help you recognize which course it is that you actually need to go. And if, of course, I've said something in this particular video, you want to know more information, go to my own personal website, which is drjeffreyhanna.com, where you'll find all kinds of other videos, blog articles related, again, to the big idea, how it is that little problem where your head meets the rest of your spine can have big impacts in terms of your health, well-being, and can, again, change the quality of your life. And last but certainly not least, if you are in the Eastern Washington area, and you're thinking, okay, yep, I'm ready to start this process here, then you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you out. I'm one of the team members here at Clear Chiropractic in Spokane, Washington, and you can visit us at clearchirospokane.com, or you can call us direct at 509-315-8166. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. I look forward to meeting. I look forward to hearing your feedback there. Until next time, take care. Bye. This is Dr. Jeffrey Hanna, Clear Chiropractic. Get well, live well, stay well.